So probably the number one blooper that comes to mind, or backstage thing that happened, it was the summer of 1998, I believe, and the first show of the season was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And we were on closing night, and we were all at the theater. We were all getting ready. I remember doing vocal warm-ups and going into the dressing room to start doing my hair and makeup and all the things that I normally did. And then we kind of got word there's a big storm moving in, and there was like thunder and lightning, and the audience was starting to arrive. We were still getting ready backstage, and then all of a sudden the tornado sirens go off, and so they tell all the actors that we have to stay in the dressing room. So they cram us all in, all the guys, all the girls in there, close the doors. We have to stay inside the dressing rooms. Any audience members were there were ushered into the bathrooms, because that was the only secure space at the time. There was no children's theater, there was no costume storage. It was the pole barns out back or the main theater. Those were your only choices. Right. So the bathrooms were the safest place to go. So they were routing actual ticket holders into the bathrooms and all the staff into the dressing rooms to wait and see if this tornado was going to pass, which luckily it did, but with it took all of the power. So we were, 8 o'clock. By this time it was like showtime, and we had no power at all. And it was like, what are we going to do? Because it's closing night. We can't ask ticket holders to come back the next night or the next week instead. We have no way to exchange tickets. It's either like do this or they just don't get to see it.
Yeah, so basically, and I believe Weathervane still works this way, closing night is usually strike night as well. So we had the other shows sitting out on the tarmac ready to come in for load in. So we have to load out for them. Well, we scrambled around. We made the decision that we were going to go ahead and do the show with generators. So we scrambled. We went and borrowed 2 or 3, maybe 4 portable generators. We ran about 6 work lights up on the catwalk facing the stage. We just basically had them on. We didn't do any blackouts. We didn't do any lighting cues or anything like that. We ran separate power for the orchestra. We had 5 or 6 vehicles in the back for using transformations around.
Using the headlights of the vehicles as the backstage lighting, because with Forum we were everywhere. We were outside and around the buildings and down the aisles and in the moat at the front of the stage. And so it was, we need to get power everywhere, and there was no way to do that. So the audience waited while we got organized, and it took like an hour probably to set up generators, get the generators, set up the generators, run the work light type situations where the audience could see what was happening at all. Jerry Sykes
ended up having to go to the emergency room because she bonked her head on broke her nose on one of the metal girders when we were trying to run the work lights. Obviously,
it was dark.
It was dark. We were trying to do it. She just stood up and whacked her nose on the beam. And
she's the lighting designer, so she was trying to work on that and just ended up. But she was also supposed to play in the orchestra, and so then we were short an orchestra player, and she plays multiple instruments. So that was crazy. When we weren't on stage, we were holding flashlights over the orchestra so they could see their music, because there wasn't enough power to run work lights.
And it was also still
raining. And we were running around that everywhere. And so it was probably like midnight by the time the show came down, because by the time we had started it, got things up and started it, and it's a long show, and we got through all of it.
Intermission, we had to fill generators.
Intermission, we had to take an extra long time and whatever. So it was probably midnight by the time the show was done. We did the whole show with no power. Never came back on. We thought it would pop back on like sometime in the course of the production. No, we did the whole thing with these quartz lights, sort of things,
work lights that you just get at Home Depot,
like a garage light, and to light the show. The car lights out back, flashlights on the orchestra.
Yeah, and actually we did get power back that night. It was
In
probably
time for strike.
Yeah, it was probably 15 or 20 minutes into strike, and then all the power came back up.
Which was actually a good thing.
Which was great.
Because you never have enough time for strike as it is. So definitely a memorable evening, and one of those, the show must go on. It certainly went on that night, and the audience was so appreciative.
Yeah, I think we got several communications from the audience members the next day, how much they appreciated us actually going on with the show and performing the show for them.
Kind of taking that extra mile, because if we didn't, they wouldn't have seen it at all. We would have had to have struck the show and moved on with the season, and it was the opening show of that season, and so it kind of just set the tone and brought everybody together for the whole season, and started that summer out where it's just a memory you'll never forget.
Right.